Business process management, a brief introduction. Business process management has its origins back in the days of scientific management, and Frederick Winslow Taylor, who wrote a book back in 1911 called The Principles of Scientific Management. What that did was lay the groundwork, if you like, for the industrial development through the 20th century, and allowed people to think of work in a more scientific way than had previously been done. So back then we had the origins of process thinking, which was a set of input, an activity and an output. Now, through the 20th century the ideas around process developed, so much so that by the end of the Second World War people were looking at process from the point of view of process excellence and the birthing of things like Six Sigma and Lean. But Six Sigma and Lean, very good from a manufacturing perspective, were being brought increasingly into service environments. As that happened, some of the limitations of Six Sigma and Lean began to be understood better, insofar as one of the ideas is that the process is going to exist at the end of the work you're doing. Whereas more forward-thinking organisations were actually saying, well, does this process really deserve to exist? Is it actually contributing to the achievement of a successful customer outcome? So along those lines, business process management developed, and Lean and Six Sigma, business process re-engineering, business process improvement, they're all variations on a theme. And I like to think of a process as being just another description for the work we all do. So you don't have to be from any particular school of thought to really take a benefit from business process management. Now, around about the early 1990s, there was a swathe of thinking called business process re-engineering. And effectively people who were frustrated with the current ways of working said to themselves, well, let's start over with a blank sheet of paper. If we could create the organisation from scratch, what would it actually look like? And in doing that, design a blueprint for the future. And then come back to today's reality and figure out how do we get from this, today's reality, to that future point with a series of projects and plans. Well, of course, the description you create for the future is highly dependent on your knowledge of the current state, and oftentimes business process re-engineering, the radical form of business transformation, would fail because of a lack of clear understanding about why we are like we are. And around about that point, 1992, people were talking about business process, they were talking about process management, they were talking about business management, but nobody had actually articulated business process management. Which grew out of this idea of sometimes BPO was successful, and what do you do after the success? And other times where BPO wasn't successful, well, is there a more pragmatic, practical way of dealing with the future? Now, business process management of itself has developed over that last 21 years or so, and in that period of time there's been three variations on the theme. One is the one that sees business process management as a set of technologies, a set of IT systems, and there's lots of vendors who will tell you that they do business process management. The other one is a business process management which really looks at the world from an inside out. Rather like Lean and Six Sigma would, it presupposes that these processes we're looking at are actually going to exist at the end of an exercise, at the end of a project. And then there's a third variety, the one that we're covering off, which is business process management. We like to think of it as enterprise BPM or outside in. And that's where we look at the complete reality of the process. Why does the process exist? Where does the need come from? And how do we actually satisfy the need? So regardless of whether your customer is a consumer, an end person who's saying a retail fashion store buying an item of clothing, or whether it's another business who's your customer, we can apply the same criteria in terms of thinking. So business process management of itself encompasses all these different ideas around process, but especially looks at this idea of enterprise. It looks at where are the boundaries in terms of the delivery of the process. So where does the customer need start and where does it end? And that is the real process. And somebody we all know quite famously once said, the customer experience is the process. And that's pretty much where business process management is today. Those progressive organisations that have moved outside in are actually looking at the complete context of process, which of course, as we already know, can change fundamentally what goes on at the nitty-gritty detail part of our organisations. That's business process management.